On today's show, we have the pleasure of hearing from a Jamaica Queens, New York native. Someone who knows how to hit the reset button on life and come back better than ever. From salon coordinator to endpoint engineer at VMware. A leader in diversity and inclusion, and a woman with a big voice for those who speak softly. Her professional strides, though great, hold no candle to the size of her heart. Never forgetting how she started, she mentors and teaches young women how to navigate the tech industry, serves food at food pantries and homeless shelters, and is the secretary of this nonprofit, Tied Together. The best big sister her brothers could ever ask for, and her most rewarding job, being a mother to her amazing 7-year-old daughter, Angela. Welcome, Hazel Barker.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for such a great introduction. I'm sitting here like, me? That made me sound good. Go, girl.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, you're all of that and more. I hear you and I speak on a regular basis, so you tell me a lot about what's going on in life and what you're striving for next, and you always seem to be climbing the hill and just knocking those barriers down. I want to know about VMware. It's a really big company. What do you do for them, and what in your life led you there?
So VMware, we are a global company. We went from 20,000 to 40,000 in like 4 years, which is kind of out of control, but a lot of that was due to acquisition. So we purchased a few other companies to help us with what we do. So we primarily specialize in virtualization, which people are like, what is that? So to sum it up, basically, a lot of businesses, all of their information are stored on physical servers. So just think a lot of desktops in one big room that kind of sit. But what we can do is scale that down and turn a lot of those machines into virtual machines to allow to create more space. And it also allows businesses to optimize better at a later date. So either they can increase their capacity as their business grows or decrease if they notice that there's that type of change. So that's primarily what we specialize in. We are more of a business to business company. So that's why people may be like, well, VMware, what's that? Never heard of it. But most businesses rely on the software and products that we have in order to maintain, including the federal government, major airlines, most retail businesses, and other companies like Salesforce that serve in a business to business capacity as well. And even though, yeah, so most of our customers obviously are external, and my customers for what I do from a support side are internal. So just making sure that all of our employees, everything from password resets to needing a new machine to physically repairing the machine that they have, making recommendations for applications and different types of hardware to help them with performance from a day-to-day space. And then, as you kind of mentioned earlier, also, I'm one of our leaders for our diversity and inclusion initiative. So just making sure that everyone has their fair share, whether it man, woman, Black, Latino, LGBTQ, Indian, Asian, whatever it is. We all have different barriers that we're all trying to overcome within the industry, whatever industry it may be. And so for me, just trying to be that voice and be a leader for those who are underrepresented to make sure that we are being heard and we are getting our seat at the table.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You mentioned Salesforce, and that's pretty funny. I'm in the car business, and we use Salesforce.
Oh,
And I
see?
never knew that VMware was affiliated with Salesforce.
Yeah, so like we
I
use
myself,
our products and we use theirs. Like our salespeople, all of them. Without Salesforce, we may have no business. Yeah.
I would have known that. I would not have known that the two were tangled in any way, shape, or form. What's funny is I never intended on being in the car business. You've known me since I was a teenager. I had no intention on being in the car business. I'm curious if you were always interested in technology.
Just from a personal stance, yes, I've always liked computers and they've intrigued me with the abilities that they allowed. Especially being older, we come from like that AOL generation, right? So just being able
Right.
to get the dial-up connected and you hear that and you waiting for that connection just so you can talk to friends, globally, nationwide, whatever it may be. And so it's always been an interest for me then. And honestly, I got my career started by accident. And people are like, how'd you get into tech? It literally was an accident.
Yeah.
I was living in Florida, moved back to New York, and I needed a job. So I went to a temp agency. And the first assignment that they gave me, they were like, it's with Weight Watchers. Do you want to? I was like, oh, yeah, everyone knows about Weight Watchers, of course.
Right.
And so I started more on the supply chain side, and my manager kind of had a dual role over supply chain and over IT. And she's like, listen, I'm going to be focused more in our city office, New York City, compared to Long Island. And she's like, do you want to come and work out there with me? Now, never having worked in the city, it seems like that's like the dream for all New Yorkers, like say I work in the city.
Right,
And
yeah.
so it was like, yes, I have an opportunity to work in the city, sign me up. Now that was before I knew what train life every day would be like.
Girl, no, I never experienced that.
But then, it just opened up my eyes to so much more in what technology really is. And most people think that it's all about programming and coding. And there's so many other areas, and it really opened me up to that. So I was grateful to just kind of fall into it by chance and having the exposure that I've had over the years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you mentioned that you moved from Florida to New York, but you are a New York native. So you wound up going from New York to Florida,
Yes.
back to New York,
Yes.
and now you're in Georgia.
Yes.
Tell me, that's okay. That's okay. Because I did say you are the reset queen and you come back better than ever. But tell me, like, what is that feeling when you know it's time to make a new start? What happens right before you make that decision? Or right at that moment?
Gosh, I feel like so much. It's almost like a whirlwind because you really are making a big decision for your life. Before making my move to Georgia, my moves that I have made, it was just me, and I only had to worry about me. I put a plan in place as best as I could because, one thing we always say, if you fail to plan, you will plan to fail. And I said, okay, well, let me attempt to put a plan together on what it is that I'm at least looking for. What do I need in order to help me sustain myself? And then to also work on progressing. And it's nerve-wracking. It feels like your body is in knots and your mind is wondering. And, I'm a what if person. So always thinking about the what ifs and then also figuring out a solution for that. If I run into this issue, then I can solve that by doing A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So I think that that's key. A lot of people let their nerves get in the way. But one thing that I've learned is you cannot grow in your comfort zone. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I'm comfortable. And if I want to get something, then I have to kind of step out of this because that's how I'm going to kind of grow to the next level. And fortunately, that has worked for me. I've taken the leaps and leaped in faith, and faith has kept me covered. And so I'm so grateful for that, and it was hard. I almost want to say it was harder as I got older because my family was like, okay, well, are you sure? And when I'm like, listen, like you guys are still the right things in me. So just know that if I'm going to make a next move, I'm going to try to make it better than the last one that I've made. And I've been fortunate, knock on wood, to never have had failed with making any of these moves because many people do. I left New York to go to Florida and didn't want to come back. And I was almost put in a situation 6 months after my move where I would have had to go back to New York. But I was like, no, I can do this. And by God's grace, I was able to. And I lived in South Florida for 7.5, almost 8 years, and kind of moved back to New York because I wanted to, not because I had to. And I was grateful that at 19 and moving to a state where I knew no one, that I was able to succeed and do that. And people are like, you did what? And you were hot? I'm like, yeah, but a lot of that is determination and mindset. And I always had I'm just going to go get it kind of attitude. And unless I absolutely can't, then I have to turn back around and go home. But if there's a slightest possibility that I can keep going and not have to turn around and go back with that feeling of defeat, then that is what I wanted to strive for. And so I've been fortunate where anytime I've made a move, it's always been able to be on my own terms.
That's pretty awesome. It sounds like you've made some calculated risks. I'm going to assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that at younger years you made some risks took some risks that weren't as calculated, but they worked out. Is that accurate?
Yes. I want to say, honestly, living in Florida, that was totally Uncalculated. I woke up one day to a phone call from my dad, who he and I at the time were estranged. And, we started building a relationship over just a few months. And he was like, "Do you want to move to Florida?" And I was like, "Yeah," not really thinking, I was young. I had a really good job. And for me, I think now, like, oh no, but I was 19 years old, fresh out of high school. I was making like almost $20 an hour. I had a really, so at that age and that time, that was really good. And I decided to leave all of that just because I was hoping that I can build this relationship with my dad and then it could work, right? And
Yeah.
moving to a place and not knowing anyone. I mean, my siblings, but they were younger than me. They are younger than me. And so it's not like they could have helped me if I needed it. I didn't have friends, and outside of them being my family, I didn't have anyone. So it was like, if this doesn't work, you're going to kind of be without, right? And without a lot. And do you want to do that being 1,500 miles from home? And I said, yes, why not? Right? If it doesn't work, I knew that I always had the possibility to go back home. And that was the thing. It's not like I didn't have anything to fall back on. So I think in making certain moves, you want to make sure that, God forbid, it doesn't work, you do at least have something to fall back on. And I was able to, I knew that I could go home worst case. Didn't want to. It felt good to just live on my own and finally start moving into that adult phase of life. But I was prepared to pivot if I needed to.
Awesome. So it was calculated a little bit, but huh?
And I was saying, even moving to Georgia kind of was like, I had a plan and I was supposed to move in a whole year. And then I was like, no, we're going to change that. And I moved 5 months later.
Right. I know.
So
it's crazy how it works out. But it does sound like it was a bit calculated going to live with your dad, experience having that relationship with him because you all were estranged. And so you wanted to experience that, but it was a little calculated as well because you knew you had a backup plan. So you didn't just throw it all at the wind. You did take a risk, but you were making sure that you were okay at the end of the day, which is very admirable.
Yes. And for me, I mean, even then, I just knew that that was something that I had, no one told me, right? But it was just in me to know that, okay, if you're going to do this, that's fine, go ahead. But you don't want to leave yourself 100% without if things don't go your way. And I think that that's important. We can take moves and make leaps and jump out of windows, right? But there's a certain way to do it. And I think that, one thing, I'm in a leadership development course right now, and we learned that we have to have a personal board of directors, and everyone on your personal board can't kind of be a yes man, right? Like, yes, go ahead and do this. Yes, go ahead and do that. You want people who you can confide in and ask those questions, and they're going to be upfront and honest, so I've been fortunate that through my decision making, I didn't always have to go at it alone. And I think that that's important, just having those other voices to be that voice of reason. Yes, I think all of us is like, I want them to agree with me. I kind of, but that doesn't mean that we need them to agree with us, right? And so having people, like you and a couple of my cousins and some of my other friends who I can just kind of go to and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm trying to do, and have them help me further develop that, and just make sure that I'm looking at it from different angles, because sometimes we see things so one-sided, but just having those outside voices can be a good thing. Now, all outside voices aren't positive and they aren't good for you, but you have to learn how to have people in your life who have your best interest at heart, who will support you in what you're doing because they love you. But if it's not right, it's not right. And you have to be open enough to them saying that and understanding where they're coming from, and that it's not to cause harm to you, but it's just to make sure that, you're trying to cover all of your bases.
Yeah. Bringing that up, did you have somebody in your life that was a major positive influence? And if so, who were they and what they do for you? Have they changed your train of thought?
So it's weird. Part of me wants to say no, but then I guess the other part of me can say my mom, right? She's always been fearless, and my mother has a physical disability, right? But she's never let that stand in her way. So even when people were telling her that she can't, she always knew that she could. She thought about, if I'm going to do this, then how is it going to affect me? Is there anything that I'm going to go through that may limit me because of my physical limitations that people can see? But she just always had the right mindset and always kind of instilled that you can do it. And I think that that's important, especially for a child, for a girl, for a Black girl, to hear and to see and know that, there may be some things that are going to stand in your way, but how do you persevere past that? And that right there, for me, looking back at it now, I'm realizing that that actually played more of a role than I thought it would. I just thought that that was normal and that was what was supposed to happen. But, as I've come across people through my years, I realized that a lot of people didn't have that. They don't have that right now to this day. And so, having that person, and who's one, extremely grateful to still have her here in my life, and for her to ask questions as a mom, as a parent is supposed to, but also trust my judgment and knowing that, okay, I've instilled the right things in her. Don't quit, keep going, find another way and get it done.
Yeah, yeah. I felt the same way about my mom when I was younger, and now. My mom raised my sister and I in the house alone, and my cousin, who I look at as my older brother, in the house by herself. She didn't make a whole bunch, but she made it happen. There wasn't something that she couldn't do. And I used to look at her and say, well, if she can do all of this, then I have to do all of this. I feel like it's my job as her child to beat her, because she instilled that in me. And it sounds like your mom instilled that in you by doing what she did every day, taking care of you and your siblings. She had a disability, but she did not behave as such. She just went out there and she went after it.
Oh yeah, listen, my mom is the most handicapped person that you're gonna come across on the face of this earth. But I'm grateful for that because, she didn't, like, we are fully capable and able-bodied, and so many people let their own mind stand in their way of doing so many things. And here it is, she had physical limitations and her mind was already like, no, I can do it. It was just making sure that the physical could align with that. And that just goes to show the power of our brains and our mental capacity and how we can actually make things work if we have the right thought process. That will take you so far. And she knew here that she could do it. So it was like, okay, mind and brain talk to body. That's it. Neurons and vertebrae and arteries and all of this. I need all of you to connect and do your work and work your magic. And it worked out for her. So that was another reason for me, like, well, if she could do it, you don't have any of that. So you better go, and you have no excuse almost, I didn't have one.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people, and I know them personally, and I know there's more than who I know, but that just feel alone and feel like they don't have any positive influence around them. What advice would you have for those people that don't feel like they have a positive circle to turn to?
So a lot of times we look at the immediate family, very close neighborhood friends and whatnot, but sometimes we have to step outside of that. And it's hard when you're younger to understand that it's pride, but sometimes pride gets in the way, right? So we don't want to ask for the help. It can be teachers, it can be, the librarian, it can be the person who you see who works at the store, it could be the store manager, somebody who's in a leadership role, who you see doing things. And it's okay to ask, how did you get here? What steps did you take? Did you have any boundaries that could have stood in your way or that are standing in your way? I think that it's important to kind of think outside the box on that, because that voice of reason, that mentor, that sponsor that you're looking for may not come from the immediate place where you think that it's going to come from. There's so many local organizations that give back to the youth, such as Tie Together, and have community volunteers who are associated. You have your YMCAs, you have local youth groups, church groups, so just finding adults in your life who you see who are on the right track and the right path to success. And sometimes you don't know what track they're on, because these tracks are not straight. There's so many twists and turns, but I think that that's the power of the story and what always makes a story greater. So just really finding people, again, who may not be in your immediate circle, who you can reach out to, who will advise you to the best of their ability, who will keep your best interest at heart and be doing it to really and genuinely help you succeed. And once you can find those people, people will always tell you what they know and how they got there. Most people will, I would say that. And
Mhm.
people who, like us, who have been through things in life and had to walk the road that was not so smoothly paved, you want to give back more because you're like, you know what, I know what challenges and issues that I had that was in my way. So how do I do my part to make sure that those coming behind me can avoid those if possible? Everyone can't, but if possible, how can I be the voice to help them navigate around or even through that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's important to both of us. You know me and me
Mhm.
knowing you. I know that that's important to both of us to just kind of show people the path we took, though your path may be different, but just show you, what I went through. So maybe you can avoid some of those things. Or if you find yourself in that place, well, here's what you can do next to make it a little bit easier. And just kind of piggybacking off of that, would you mind telling us about a major setback you had in your life where it did not seem hopeful and how you felt in that moment?
Um, I don't want to necessarily say a setback, but kind of like a pivotal moment in my life was when, I do have one child, she's 7, and it was during the time when my relationship with her dad was coming to an end, and just wondering if I could do it and if I could still be the parent that she needed, being a single parent and still having to work and make sure that I was giving her everything that she needed and deserved. And so that was nerve wracking for me. I had a mom who had help, and I knew that I had family help, right? But still, I also am not my mom in a sense that I wasn't a teenage parent, right? I had her at almost 30 years old. So just thinking that I had to do and do it by myself. So that for me kind of made me look at life differently. She really helped me uh, up my game and really change my thought process to strengthen what I I guess I already had in me, but to some extent didn't really understand it then, which is you've got this. Right. And it was at that time when I really started looking back at the things that I've done and making the moves from, New York to Florida and then kind of going back and forth between there and just the career path that I've gone on and saying, well, if you can do all of these things and still be successful, then you can absolutely be a mother and still do all of these things and um, not take away from her the things that she needs from you. You'll still be able to give to her. And once I found out how to navigate that, fortunately, I was able to do that early, but that's where having support does come in. But after that, I was like, oh, I got this. All right, we're going to keep going. So that for
That's
me
right.
was one of the biggest things, just making sure that I can be the mother to her that my mom was to me and better, because that's what we should always strive to
Right.
do. It be better than what was before.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you is that single motherhood or not having the help is not something that you saw growing up to know how to navigate that walkway. Is that accurate?
Yes, yes. I mean, I guess
Okay.
to some extent I saw my mom do it, but my grandparents were such an intricate part in me being raised. My aunt and my uncle, like they were my siblings and other parents as well. So I never really lost anything, but being the older sibling, and kind of being out there as much as I was in the world, different things were expected of me. And so I just didn't want to fail myself. I didn't want to fail my daughter. I didn't want my family to look at me like, well, if your mother could do it and she had a disability and she was a teenager, like there's no reason why you couldn't and you didn't, and shame on you. And so I just didn't want to have to experience that. Um,
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times when we're in a relationship with somebody and we have a child with that person, we start to visualize our lives with that person, what it'll look like with the child, with the other parent, yourself, where you're going. And then when that comes to a halt, it can be crushing, it can be saddening, it can make you look at your life and say, well, what next? Because you hadn't been planning for what next without that person. But how did you know that your story was not over because the what next isn't what you had envisioned before? How did you know you could keep going?
Well, I'm fortunate that her dad and I were always friends. You know, I've known him for literally over half my life at this point. But because we had a friendship, even though we separated, we still were able to remain friendly with one another, not just cordial, because there is a difference in that. And we were able to remain friendly with one another and keep her best interests in the forefront, right? No matter what personal things that he and I were going through, it wasn't about me, it wasn't about him, it wasn't about our relationship. It was about him being the best dad that he could to her and me being the best mom that I could to her, and her knowing that no matter what, whether my parents are together in a relationship or not, they'll always be together. They'll always be family. And that was important for her to see. You know, even though I
Yes.
didn't see that growing up because my dad wasn't around, that was by choice. And my mother never talked bad about him. That's another thing that's important, and that's key, right? So for me,
Yeah.
it was always, and I'm grateful that she did that, because for me, I'm like, well, my mother never made my dad to be worse than what he was, what I could see. You know, and it was all
Mm-hmm.
what I saw with my own eyes, never anything verbally from her to diminish whatever thought or feeling that I was having about him. You know, she encouraged me talking to him and being in his life. It was a choice for me where I was like, but we're okay without him. So I don't. But I always made it a point that if he and I ever did have to part ways and we did have child, which we ended up in that situation, that, you know, I would never make him out to be a bad father or an absent
Right.
father, because eventually she would get to the point in life where she would see that. And I'm grateful that, you know, having that relationship with him, having an amazing relationship with his parents and his extended family, and then the same for him with me. So because of that, we're still family. You know, that didn't
Mhm.
change. We just weren't in a relationship as far as he and I being a couple. And
Right.
that right there is one of the biggest things that I could have ever been grateful for, that we both were in the same mental space to know that it's bigger than you and I. Let's just steer the course and do what's right for her.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to come to that understanding that even though the relationship may break, though you hoped it would work, even though it may break, that it is important to put the child first. Because we all remember when we were children and how we felt. And to your point, that your mother never spoke ill of your father. It's funny how God or life or the universe, however you look at it, how God prepares you for the future. Even though your mother wasn't a single mother, by everyday standards, and you didn't get to see that part really, she still prepared you for the path that you were going to walk. You know, God knows what happened yesterday and what's going to happen tomorrow, and to see that your mother never spoke ill of your father, it put something in you to let you know, you know what, let me at least try to make this work the best I can and speak well about my daughter's father in front of her so that she can get all the good things that we have for her. So I think that's pretty awesome. To
Yeah,
switch gears a little bit, so you bought a house,
I did.
huh?
I
You bought a house, you moved to
I was just
Georgia.
trying to
What
be
year
like
did you
you
move
when I
to
grow up,
Georgia?
girl. That was it.
Huh?
I said I was just trying to
What'd
be
you
like
say?
you when I grow up. That's all.
Listen, I'm still trying to figure out who I'm gonna be when I grow up. I'm still walking my journey. But no, you moved down to Georgia in 16?
Yes, September of 2016, and I brought my
Mm-hmm.
house. No, September of 2015, and I brought
Okay, yeah.
my house in May of 2018. Yes, so a little bit ahead of my 5-year goal. Definitely proud of myself for that. I wanted
Awesome.
to be
I feel
here
like
at
when
least
you bought
5 years before, and so I was grateful. Listen, you lead by example, right? You led, and I was like, oh, it can be done. I can do that too. Okay, and then just taking my time. So that was a really, really great
the house.
accomplishment.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Tell me what your neighborhood looks like. What is when you went to go see it? What were the things that caught your eye?
So I would say first and foremost, pulling into like my subdivision, there's a lake. So I was like, oh, that's cute. And although my house doesn't sit in the water, just still having that right there was nice. And I saw what I wanted in a house. Believe it or not, I wanted an older house. I didn't want something that was brand new. I wanted that kind of big old front porch. I wanted a neighborhood that was a little diverse. And I got all of that. I got an older house, but I got my big old front porch. I got my nice yard. I have neighbors who are Black, white, Asian, Indian, that literally we're all like one next to the other.
Yeah.
And I wanted my daughter to see that growing up. I mean, to be honest, the primary reason why we even moved to the Atlanta area was because all these Black people were doing well. And I was like, all of you? Yeah, I
Yeah.
want in on that. How do I get a piece
It's
of
empowering.
that?
It's empowering to see
No,
somebody
very
that looks like
empowering.
you
And
doing well.
oh, absolutely. And then to see so many younger people doing so well, and it was amazing to see. And I'm like, man, if I can settle here, then this is a norm for her. Right. I grew up
Yeah.
seeing, people doing good and whatnot, but a lot of them didn't look like me. And so for
Hmm.
her to be able to have that, she knows, not just because of what mommy's telling me I can do, but no, I see all of the people around me who look like me doing so. And that right there was key for me with wanting to raise her to be proud of who she is as a Black woman. And we were able to find that space here. But back to my house, it was something about the feel of it. And my daughter really, really liked it. Excuse me, went to see a few others. And she's like, but mommy, I really like the first one. And I was like, you know what, baby? I like the first one too. Let's go
Yeah.
for it.
Your kids could, my son, he's a lot older than your daughter, 16, but he has a big influence on my decisions.
Oh, yeah.
They're our world. Speaking about your house and your neighborhood, is your neighborhood anything like the neighborhood you grew up? If so, how? And if not, how are they different?
Ooh. So to some extent, yes. There are a lot of families, there are a lot of young children, and I can remember being younger, and we all kind of went outside. That's when we used to go outside to go and play, right? But just being able to walk up and down, a 3 or 4 block span, and families were outside, children were outside, people were barbecuing, everyone knew one another and spoke, and, so I do still have that feel, which is what I like. I would say the biggest difference is because my neighborhood is more mixed than where I lived. For the most part, everyone looked like me. Everyone was Black with a few other different ethnicities, but we were all still part of that, I guess, underrepresented minority community. Whereas where I live now, I do have a lot more white people in my neighborhood. There are a lot of older people, a lot more older people in my neighborhood than younger. So seeing that, but overall, I would say it's more of a comparison instead of a contrast.
Awesome. Awesome. So I know that you mentor young women in the tech industry and guide them on how to navigate it. What's your feeling behind that? What was your motivator?
Just really initially it started as wanting to just give back and be a voice. I am fortunate that it was because, and as I stated earlier, my first manager at Weight Watchers who kind of helped me transition more to the tech side, and she was a Black woman. And just the fact that she saw something in me to want to help me expand my career, expand my skill set, and that was important. And I think that had that not been the case, and it still took me a long time to get into mentoring because I didn't know how, didn't know where to start. But it may have even taken me longer, or it would have been even more of a fear, because how do I show someone something that I didn't get from someone who looked like me? And I think that that is different because as Black people, as Black women, we go through different things in life, in society, and it's easier to listen to someone or take advice from someone when they've kind of walked that road that you've walked. So being a woman who's young, who does have a child, even though I'm a little older, knocking on 38, but I'm still not far removed from, my 20s, and having siblings who are in their, let me see, my youngest is 20 and going up to 26, so I can still relate to them in that sense where because of that and the conversations that we have, I'm able to still have that an influence on, young college adults, those who are just early in their careers, because I'm not 30 and 40 years removed from what they're still currently experiencing. And so once I knew that I could talk to younger women and they would be willing to listen, I knew that I had to do my part. You know, the media right now has such an influence over our youth, all of the youth. I don't care what demographic they come from. So, and they always aren't the best positive messages. So just showing them that there are other ways. If you want to be a model, that's fine, but be the right one. You know, if you want to be in the music industry, that's fine, but don't do it just because everyone else is doing it. If you want to be an athlete, then that's fine, but work on perfecting your craft and being the best at it that you can, not just doing it because you find that it's an easy way out. And then also, you know, showing them different avenues in taking so, because just because you want to be an athlete or, you know, you are athletic, let me say that, doesn't mean that you need to be an athlete, right? So you may not make it into the NBA, but can I be a coach? Can I work in the back office? Can I be an agent? Like, there's so many other different avenues. And so just opening up people's mind, especially like I was saying in the tech space, there's so many different roads that you can travel down. And a lot of women coming in don't know, because just generationally, women have not been given as much information as men. And so I felt that it was my responsibility, as I start tapping in and learning different things and learning how to play the game, that I'm showing younger people, because they can achieve so much more than I could have, than I have at this point. Like, had I known 15 years ago what I know now, I'd be in a different place, not complaining and grateful for my journey. But if I can pour things into someone earlier and they know, then they have so much more of a head start. And I think that that's important. Again, even more so for us, because we've already been pushed behind, so far behind the curve with the starts that we've had in life. So how can I help propel someone a little bit further to help them get to their end goal a lot quicker?
Absolutely.
Or even past that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. I know you do a lot of work in diversity and inclusion, and it's important for us to see people that look like us. Whether you are a white male, a black female, a black male, a white male, it doesn't matter. You need to see somebody that looks like you, because your inner voice will tell you that you can't do it because you don't see somebody that looks like you doing it. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized that I was denying myself certain opportunities because I didn't see a black woman do that. So that just must be something black women don't do. So let me just stay away from that. That seems to be more the boys' thing. So let me just go over here and do what girls do. But it's unnecessary to put yourself in that bubble if you're capable of more. Now, it's not to say that the boys' game or the girls' game is better, one is better than the other. It's just take yourself out of that bubble and have that positive exposure like you're giving to these young ladies. And you just never know where you could go. My next question for you would be, what is something that you've achieved in your adulthood that your younger self would not have imagined?
Honestly, and it seems like something that every adult should do, but I would say buying a house, right? You know, I saw it done, but then as I started getting older, I didn't think that I was capable of doing it, or I would end up in a position where I could. And when I realized, you know, after having friends who were able to take that journey and be successful, and it was like, oh, okay, but that's why representation is key, right? And representation matters. When you
Mm-hmm.
see people who are doing something and they look like you know that it can be done. And so seeing so many of my friends, you included, accomplishing this, and I'm like, you know what? This is possible. I don't have to exclude myself, because I was excluding my own self and not realizing that I actually was in a position to do it. I was telling myself, like, no, you're not ready yet. Just not yet, not yet. And it was like, no, right now, actually, you can.
Right.
So for me, that was one of the biggest things that I didn't see. I don't want to say never saw myself doing, but didn't
Mm-hmm.
know when, at what point in life that would happen. And so
Right.
glad that I was able to do it by 35, you know, wishing that it would have been sooner, but I didn't know that it was even possible. I thought that you had to wait until you were almost 40 or over 40 to do these things. And it's like, no, you
Or
can.
be married.
Yeah, or
People
be
put that in
married,
there too.
right?
Or be married.
And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm like, man, had I known, like I said, 15 years ago, I would have been doing this at 20 something, not 30 something, you know?
Right. But Maybe you weren't ready then. I know I had an opportunity in my 20s to get a house, and thank God I didn't, because I would have never kept that house up the way it should have been kept up. But it's important to ask yourself the question, can I?
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself the question, can I? If the answer is I don't know, find out what it takes, and then if you're capable of it, say yes I can. If you're not capable of it, then you say, well, what does it take to make me capable? And even once you say, yes, I can, you still have to learn the steps that are going to take you to this place
Mm-hmm.
of home ownership. Let's just use that. Any goal you have, but home ownership. Is your credit good? Do you have the down payment money? Do you know what area you want to live in? Do you have a mortgage broker, a real estate agent? There are a lot of steps. But
Yeah,
if you break them down into little pieces, it becomes very easy, very easy.
I
So,
know.
kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so many times, we're always looking at the end goal and we immediately think, okay, there's 79 steps to get here. I have to do all 79 right now. And it's like, no, just hit the first one and go to step 2 and
That's
then
it.
3. And then sooner or later, you'll get to 79,
The
but you
first
can
one.
only literally take one step at a time. And, I think as a people in general, that's kind of how we are. And we just want to like, okay, so I just want that and I got to do all of this. So a lot of times we discourage ourselves because again, we're thinking that we have to take this big leap immediately. And it's like,
Mhm,
no, it will happen. Carve at it. That
mhm,
sculpture wasn't built because there was just a block of clay and then the artist said, oh, voila, and now it's done.
mhm,
No, they had to nick and chip and notch away everything that crease and crevice that they were trying to make in order to build that sculpture. So sometimes we have to know, okay, this is the end goal, but I have to start with this one piece first in order to get there. And then
mhm.
once this is done, tackle the other thing. And as you start going along, you start to realize how many things are intertwined. And sometimes you start accomplishing more than one step, in just one action or two actions because
Snowball.
they're closely
Snowball.
they're closely related. So
Mhm,
just realizing that a lot of the times we limit ourselves because we stand in our own way because of fear.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. There's a big deal. It
Mm-hmm.
is a big deal. But then that goes back to, just ask yourself, are you capable? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're not, what does it take to make me capable? What does it take to qualify me for this thing? If that's your goal, if that's your dream, if that's something that you want to do, well, then you have to figure out what the 79 steps are.
Yep.
And then don't look at the rest of the 78. Look at number one. Get
Yep.
number one done, and then move it down. You're only on number two
Yeah.
because you're going to look at that whole picture and then get overwhelmed. And it's like, nah, I don't even have time. Because I'm super impatient. You know
Yeah.
that. I'm very impatient. And if I see it's going to take 79 steps, I'm out. I just
Yeah.
can't. So I can put the 79 steps down, but I can only look at one at a time.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're looking and you already did 50. You're so much closer.
And
But it's
we
awesome.
hesitate because of those limitations that we set on ourselves and not knowing, like
Mhm,
you said, am I capable? And I think that sometimes immediately if we aren't, we just stop there instead of finding out, well, what will it take for me to become capable? Same thing that I
mhm.
tell a lot of people when it comes to technology. There's a book on everything, right? And there's guidance for everything. It will get you where you want to go. So if this is what you want, if you don't know it, what are you going to do to find it out? Right? What books are you going to
Right.
do? What podcasts are you going to listen to or watch? What seminars are you going to go to? How much effort are you going to put into it? Because you're only going to get out what you put in. So if you put in nothing, then you
Mhm,
get nothing. If you put in something, you get back something. If you put in a lot, you get back a lot. And so those are the seeds that we have to sow in order to reap the
mhm.
benefits of the harvest. If you don't sow the seeds, then you will just have dirt.
Okay. You're right. You're right. Looking back on your life and over the years, what is some advice that you would give to your younger self?
Whew. Um, do it now. I think that a lot of things in life I just limited myself on and was like, oh, okay, now I can't do this now. I'm too young. I don't have enough money. I don't have the skill set. I think that I've always had the mental capacity to do so, but maybe to some extent I didn't because I also talked myself out of certain things. So, I would just definitely say go for it. Um, have grit, because that takes you very, very far. I've been fortunate to have that, but I think that had I known then what I know now, I would have went harder with a few other things in life. Primarily I would say finishing college. That's something that I didn't do, and I'm fortunate that I've been blessed with the opportunity to succeed professionally without that. But there's so many people who do need that. And then I also think that, what if I did have that? I could also be in a different place in my career. So definitely, if you're going to start something, finish it. See it all the way through, because you never know, once you achieve that in the end, what it could lead to later on down the line. And that's something that I always wonder, like, what if I did have my degree and finished it, 12, 13, however many years ago, what could my life have been from a professional standpoint? I could be making a whole lot of money, but maybe I couldn't be. Here I am with no degree, and I make more money than a lot of people that I know, most people that I know. And, I'm grateful for that, but that could have not been for me. I would say choose wisely. um, there are some decisions that I've made personally that sometimes I wish that, I don't want to say I wish that I didn't, because everything for a reason, right? And I had to go through something to know whether it was for me or not. But just really thinking a little bit more on protecting my personal space and my personal energy, and not allowing certain people or things to change that. So I wish I knew how to balance that earlier in life. It would have kept me from certain interactions in spaces that I could have avoided. And not necessarily saying that they were bad for me, but they weren't always with my best interest at heart.
Yeah, yeah. Just that you wish you would have thought it through more,
Yes,
basically.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we stop at that surface level, or if there's five and we go to one and two and we're like, oh, okay, no, but just really thinking things through a lot more. I would have made better decisions for myself where, certain things that I would have done, I wouldn't have felt the way that I did after.
I got you. I got you. Um, so coming up on our last few questions, share with the people, what is a quote that you live by?
Oh, I feel like I have so many. So one, like I said earlier, plan to fail, or fail to plan, and then you'll plan to fail. I've always wrote things down in a journal, and not knowing that I was actually planning. But then as I've come back later on and I looked at lists that I've made, and I'm like, oh, I did this and I did that. Oh, and I did this and I did that too. So
Yeah.
that for me was key. And that's kind of how I've learned the power of manifestation. And I think that we can have everything, but so many times we just try to keep things in our head, and then it starts getting jumbled. And we go through so much on a day to day that things kind of can get lost. So for me, writing it down has definitely provided a lot of clarity for that, and really helped me figure out what I want. When I knew that I wanted to buy my house, right? I had to plan and write down certain things that I needed to take, and what I actually wanted in a house. Like, I didn't want to just buy a house. There were certain key features that I wanted, and I was able to get that. From a career stance, knowing what I wanted to do, and being able to write that down, and okay, start to find that out of the blue. It was like, hey, do you want to take this course? Do you want to sit on this training? And just really getting the exposure to the different avenues that I was trying to go down anyway. And because of the power of manifestation and me planning and say, okay, I want to do this by this date, those things just kind of align themselves for me. And I'm grateful for that. What's another quote that I would like to say? Um, and I know it's going to be, I don't want it to sound bad when I say it, but get that ish done, right? So many times, like, we just don't do things. And it's like, why not? Like, you are the only one that's stopping you. And too many times people don't do things or don't accomplish, and they're looking at other people and trying to point the blame. But it's like, but what part did you play in it not happening? And we have to own our own stuff, right? And I think that that's the hardest thing. But once you can own you, the good, and especially the bad, then it makes it a lot different, as you start to navigate around certain scenarios, right? And so one thing I had to own was me when it comes to like procrastination and certain other things like, no, you're only limiting yourself. Just go and get that done, right? And another way to rephrase that, you'll hear the phrase and it'll say, eat the frog first, because it's like, that's like the hardest thing that anyone wants to digest. But go for the hardest things
Right.
first and accomplish that. And once you do, it makes the road so much easier and the journey so much smoother, because it's like, okay, now I can breathe. I've gotten that out the way. And now everything else is a piece of cake. Let me just go ahead and get it done.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's pretty awesome. I like all of those. Eat the frog first. I have heard that. I don't hear it often, but every time I hear it, I'm like, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Eat the frog first. It makes life a lot easier. If you just do the hard thing, get the hard thing out the way and just keep rolling, keep moving.
And as humans, we
What
just
is a
stray
hope?
away from that. Oh,
Sorry?
no, I was saying, as humans, we just stray away from that because we don't, it's like, no, I
Yeah.
don't want to do that part, but no, do that part. Like,
It's a natural reaction. Fear is a natural feeling. It's a feeling that we need to survive. Fear will stop you from touching a hot stove or running into a wall, but you have to learn how to regulate your fear. So it's a natural reaction to like pull away from something that's hard, but then you have to ask yourself once again, do I want this? Is it worth it? Now, if you don't want it, don't do it. I've told my son, I'll give you an example. I can't put his business all out there. So I've told my son about one thing that he seemed to have enjoyed. And he did enjoy it. He liked it, but he thought it was his passion. And I would tell him, that doesn't look like your passion to me. And he's like, yes, it is. It is my passion. I said, well, I know when people have a passion, they eat, sleep, and breathe it. You don't seem to be into it like that. And he's like, yes, he got angry. He got upset. I let him go. I said, you passion? You got it. You're right. You're right. And then he picked up something else. Now, this passion, it crushed his spirit after a while because he wasn't doing so well at it. It crushed his spirit. And as a mom, you want to see your child happy. But I wasn't going to lie to him and tell him that he had that fire for it that I just didn't see. And then he picked up something new. And there was a fire. There was for sure a fire inside of him with this particular thing. So I had another conversation with him. And I said, do you think this is your passion? He goes, yeah. I said, looking back on that other thing that I told you about, do you think that was your passion? He said, no. But it's all I had to do at the time. Mm-hmm. And that was just eye-opening to me. He needed to be exposed to other things so that he would know that there was something that he could really be on fire about. He only saw a select few of things and said, I want this one. I want to be just as great as that person. Not because he loved it. So to get back to my point, yes, do the thing. Eat the frog first. Make sure that you are passionate about it. If you don't love it, you're only going to go halfway with it, and that's not worth anybody's time. Love it, be passionate, be fired up, and go for it.
It makes a difference when you do that. Just the energy and what you put into it, it just becomes so much more, and it feels fulfilling when you do that. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between doing something because you want to or doing something because you absolutely have to. And sometimes it's better to do something because you want to, right? You find so much more joy in it and you give so much to it, which is why you're able to give so much back, which is why he's amazing at what he's doing right now.
He is fired up now. He is fired up. It takes time, though. It takes time to find. I want to say it takes time, and then I want to say it doesn't take time. It does take time to realize your passion, to realize it. But I think it's always there. It's just not sometimes it can be the thing that you think is not going to be as profitable, so you're just not going to waste time with it. But it just keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. Even though it's not as profitable and it's not as shiny as other professions, you're like, no, not right now. But one day, that thing's going to sit right on top of you, and it's going to make you love it. Who was that? Aretha Franklin? No, it wasn't Aretha Franklin. Who was it? You're going to love me.
Oh,
and
Jennifer Holiday.
Jennifer Holiday.
Yes,
Jennifer Holiday. Yes. Yeah, it's going to make you love it. Just like that. Make you love it.
No, it's so true. So one thing that I do want to just mention, because you said exposure. And one thing that
Mm-hmm.
I've learned, to be successful, exposure is important. And this is something that I've learned in the development program that I'm in. And there's an acronym called PI. It stands for performance, image, and exposure. And so being successful, performance is only 10%. Image is 30%, and exposure is 60%. And so it's
Wow.
exposure to people, to places, to things, because it helps open up your mindset. It puts you in places where, you know, having exposure to different people who can help propel you to the next steps and to the next levels of your career. Too many times we just sit in a space and we're like, okay, well, if I just do this and I just do that, you know, and I'll kind of get where I'm trying to go. No. And that's, you know, almost kind of how it was with, you know, with your son. He was performing, yes, but it wasn't until he got true exposure of what he was even capable of that it was like, oh wow. And now look at how much more he's been successful with
Right.
what he's doing and gaining followers and having people wanting to work with him because his true talent is now shining because he's gotten that exposure piece.
Mm-hmm. And he said yes to himself, you
Yes,
know, and
that
that's important for us.
part.
Yeah. Yes. You have to say yes to yourself at some point. And once you do that, then you're on the right road. What is your hope for future generations, and what role do you see yourself playing in it?
Um, so my hope is that they find the self-determination and the self-will that is within them. I know everyone realizes that different, but just hoping that, you know, whatever road they're traveling, that they find people in their lives who can continue to push them to succeed at whatever it is that they want or need to be doing. Um, to make sure that the things that they're receiving, that they're holding on to, and that they're utilizing, and understanding they do have a responsibility when they get to that point to then turn around and give back, because I believe in an each one teach one kind of thing. So just understanding that you are taking steps today that is going to affect the future. So what you're doing right now isn't just going to affect you, right? You know, little things like, and what I'm doing right now with from a mentoring space. I know that I also feel like I'm obligated to do it. I have a 7-year-old, right? And in 10, 15 years, I want people to pour into her the way that I'm pouring into other people. And I think that that is key. So just doing my part so that she can be successful. You know, I see myself continuing to mentor, continuing to, once I really get at that level, to be able to sponsor people and bring them up. Because again, representation is key. And because I'm considered, you know, people look at me as a leader, I want to lead all across the board, not just within the organization that I work for, but leading in my community as well, giving back more to the youth. I want to start a STEM summer camp once the world opens back up again and we can actually meet face to face, but I want to start a STEM camp. I think giving young students exposure to technology, especially because that's the wave of the future. And so I know a lot of people who are in different areas of the industry, and being able to expose them to all of this. So this way, when the time comes, they don't run into a lot of the blocks that I see a lot of college students and young minority adults having now, where they're saying there's no pipeline. No, there is a pipeline, because I've done my part to create, 4 and 5 to help 4 or 5 neighborhoods get 30 or 40 kids, and these 30 or 40 kids, they go to college and they're spread out either locally or nationwide, but they're also giving back, right? So they're teaching and tutoring as they're learning, with programs like what Tied Together is doing, right? So they can come in and volunteer, and there'll be a group of students my daughter's age, but these high school students are now able to pour back, because then they understand the power of giving. And that's just what I would like for them to see. There's so much power in giving, and once you give, all of your blessings are going to come to you. So don't look for them. You got to give just to give. But when you do, it just opens so much more. And just even right now, because of me giving the way that I have to the youth and wanting to see them be successful, is why I'm even here right now talking to you in this interview, right? So this is a part
Mhm.
of me still continuing to give back. Now, although it gives me exposure, I'm not looking for it for that. If I can be a voice, and if there's one thing that can be a takeaway from what they're hearing that they'll hold on to and tell a friend, right? Because sometimes the word of mouth, and not sometimes, for the most part, word of mouth is so strong and so powerful. So how can I continue to use my voice where there's at least one takeaway that a young adult is sharing with someone who's their age, to give them a different perspective or an outlook on something that they would have never thought of. To be that big sister, kind of big cousin that you can
Right.
come and talk to, because it's harder. So, we were kids and teenagers too. So some things that you don't want to talk to your parents about. And I'm not here to scold you. I'm not going to baby you. I will be truthful with you. But, just feeling comfortable to know that you have adults who are ahead of you, who are trying to pave the way so that you can continue to put these bricks on the road as your time comes and once you get to this part of your journey as well.
Mm, absolutely, absolutely. We've both lived a whole life. Um, anybody that's watching that's younger than us, there's not gonna be a whole bunch you're doing that we didn't do. There's gonna be some. There's gonna be some.
Yeah.
But if we didn't do it, we've seen it. We didn't grow up in a pristine area. We were exposed and not always to the best things, but we made it. We made it. And you've gone through a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs, but you're making it and you're doing well and you're succeeding. What can we hope to look for from you next? What's coming up on Hazel Barker's timeline?
So for me, I'm going to tap into something that I love, which I've kind of found. I don't know if it's my full purpose, but I enjoy it. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm in the process of starting a home bath and body line. So I make soaps and candles and like wax melts and things like that, all the smell good stuff, and linen spray. So just really focusing a lot more on that and getting that launched. Would I like to be as large as a Bath and Body Works? Who wouldn't, right? But that's not necessarily my goal. Just really being able to provide people with quality handmade products with all natural ingredients, because I know how it feels on my skin and it feels different and I love it.
Where, where
um,
can people find your company on social media? What's the name of it?
so it's called Amaze Home Bath and Body. It is a mashup of my name and my daughter's name. So it's Amaze AM for Angela Marie, and Haze, Haze, for short for Hazel. So it's AMHAZE Home Bath and Body, which is on Facebook and Instagram currently. I'm still working on building out my product suite, but definitely follow us to stay up to date for when we're having our official release. And I'm also in the process right now working with some of my other tech nerds, and like I said, on building a STEM program, because I think that it is important to really start giving our kids the exposure at an earlier age. Too many of our communities are underprivileged and they don't have the tools and resources. And so just making sure that I can get in, and if nothing else, they know that they can learn all about computers and not just, Word and Excel and that, but how to actually put one together, and how to properly troubleshoot, and how to work in a virtual environment and not have a physical machine that you can see, but there's 30 of them that you can actually work on that's sitting on this screen right here. So just really showing them the different avenues, getting understandings of project management, and seeing things through from beginning to end, with it just starts as an idea and in the end you have this product. And I think that that's an aspect that so many people miss. And project management, please, we need to learn how to project manage our own lives, first of all, right? Let's start there.
That part.
But just really showing them what technology could be if used the right way, and with hopes that I can provide more equipment to home. So be it laptops or monitors. I think that there's so many underprivileged children who have to either go to the library, or, parents have a laptop, but it's not theirs. It belongs to work. And that's something that I've learned, especially as we're dealing with COVID-19, with the privilege that I have. Right? Privilege comes in many different forms, but how can I use my privilege to help and support those who don't have it as well as I do? And so that's part of my plan for the future as well.
That's awesome. Can they follow your tech journey on She and Tech?
Yes. So on Instagram, it is she, Stubbs.tech, or you can just search She in Tech. The She stands for Showcasing Her Excellence. There are a lot of women who have made strides in the STEM space, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. So just really highlighting the accomplishments that have been achieved, those that are currently taking place, and what's to come in the future. And so, yes, please follow me, follow my journey as I, move throughout the tech space. I attend conferences. I deal with schools like the Coretta Scott King of Young Women's Leadership Academy. I hope I'm saying it right. But, having days where I'm exposed to youth and just being able to pour back into the community, because that's something that has, as of recently, become more top of mind for me, instead of things that I just want to do, but actually being able to do that.
Well, Hazel, it's been awesome. You are nothing short of an inspiration. I love your journey. I love your story. I love that you are still going, and I know that we'll get more awesomeness out of you in the future. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you, Todd. Together, keep doing great things. You are showing these young men and the youth the power that is within them. You are giving back to the community and doing it so carelessly. So selflessly. I don't want to say carelessly, sorry, but so selflessly. And it really comes from the bottom of your heart, which is why so many people are supporting you in your journey and what you're doing. I am grateful that you tapped me to be a part of it. And let's keep being
Absolutely.
great and pouring into our future. We have two of them who we got to make sure be great for their generations, right? And so we're
Yep.
not going to just work on our two. There's plenty of you out here. So whatever we can do to support, you can count on us over here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Hazel.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and tune in next week to Tied Together.